Welcome everyone to another edition of Capita's LinkedIn Live, and our topic today is on upcoming changes in Vietnam's ESOP regulations. And I think I have a perfect guest here with me. It's Yash Agrawal from Capita's consulting team. So Yash works quite closely with a lot of our customers on equity compensation advisory, helping them structure, modify, implement, and roll out equity programs in Vietnam and elsewhere. So Yash, really good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. I know you've done a lot of work with companies in Vietnam and companies in different parts of the world with Vietnamese employees. So excited to have a chat with you about today's topic. So how are you going?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Amit. Thank you for the introduction. So I will give the brief about my introduction, like some more details as Amit iterated about my experience. So yes, I had done multiple of the assignments. So specifically, if I talk about the countries, so I have dealt with the Singapore, US, UK, and specifically the Vietnam, because earlier, before these amendments, which we will be going to discuss in this session, so Vietnam, you can say that Vietnam was more challenging for from the offshore companies to implement ESOP for the Vietnam employees. And for my experience, so if I would like to tell you, so there are some, you can say many or multiple nuances if we will be implementing plan globally, because we will have to take care for the regulatory considerations all around the world. So now let's suppose if I come from the step by step, like how we used to implement plan on the global level. So first of all, from the regulatory point of view, so we will have to definitely take care of what exactly the Companies Act says, whether that countries Companies Act allow you to go with the ESOP plan or not. So first thing is this. Now, after going that Companies Act requirement of the regulatory requirement, then we will have to check the eligibility criteria, like to whom we can give the grants, because it should not happen that we can randomly say that for all the employees, for all the consultants, for all the personnel working with you, you can grant to them. So this is the second requirement. Now, once we will go through all the Companies Act requirement, regulatory requirement, then the second important thing comes into the picture is the taxation part. Because if you will be implementing plan globally, Amit, then there must be the question from the employer's point of view as well as from the employee's point of view. So if I keep all those parameters which we finalize, like with respect to the grant parameters, vesting parameters, and the exercise parameter, now the most important thing which exactly comes into the mind of the employer and the employee is the taxation, because they are well more concerned. So let's suppose if you are getting a salary in your hand, so you already
Yep.
know that there is a some part which is supposed to be given to the government, because government is already standing there. If you are earning
Yep.
something, then please pay us some portion out of that. So
Hmm.
in that case also, if we are giving equity shares by way of the ESOPs, then obviously we will have to take care for the taxation part, because anyhow at the time of exercise, when we will be converting our options, so options are nothing but the notional rights upon completion of the vesting, and when the exercise comes, so it becomes my absolute right. So my notional right will get converted into the absolute right. I can claim from the company. So in
Yep.
that form, I will be earning the appreciation. I will be in the money, and government is already keeping an eye on me, that whatever assets you are owing at that time at the filing of the individual tax returns, then you will have to disclose each and everything. Whatever is the appreciation, you will have to pay to us. So these all are the nuances to keep into consideration while drafting global plans. Now, specifically, if I talk about the Vietnam, because as I have already told that Vietnam was more challenging before these amendments. So first and the foremost requirement, mandatory requirement, is like there is a mandatory registration of your plan with the State Bank of Vietnam, and which is more challenging, because you already know that if you are in an offshore company and you are implementing a plan from some other jurisdiction employees, now if this hurdle comes to you that you will have to register your plan with the local bank or licensed bank of the Vietnam, State Bank of the Vietnam, then you already know that you will have to be aware, like whatever the details you are creating in that plan, so there should not be any ambiguity, there should not be any hidden terms and conditions. So this is the requirement from the Vietnam point of view. But since these amendments have came now, so these amendments have given some relaxation for the offshore companies, because now Vietnam is more concerned, like they are towards attraction of the capital flow into the Vietnam. This
Yep.
also not only allows their employees to hold the offshore investment, but also they that will you can say on the other hand that will promote the foreign direct investment into the Vietnam also, because they have given a ease of the complexity from the registration point of view, from you can say the fund, the cross border movement of the funds and the assets in the form of the equity share and the other securities.
Yep. No, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, thanks for highlighting that. And ultimately, whenever any company in any part of the world wants to roll out an equity program, you need to be aware of where your employees are, what are the local requirements, right? And as you've pointed out, some jurisdictions are a bit more friendly, some are a bit more tricky, but you need to understand the nuances in each location where your employees are. There's
Hmm.
obviously
Hmm.
very famous instances of regulations that are well known and understood, like Section 49A in the US. That
Yes.
requires you, when you issue options, has to be at fair market value. Other jurisdictions have their own requirements, but today's topic is on Vietnam. So thanks for giving us like a high level overview. What I would love to do now for the benefit of the audience, we want to go into specific detail of Vietnam's regulations. And what we'll do, we'll work through various parameters that outline the regulations. We'll contrast the current provisions, so the current rules, and the amended rules that are coming to play. So, just to give everyone's context, so Circular 23 has been recently issued in Vietnam, and it applies the new State Bank of Vietnam's regulations. It will coming into effect next Monday, the 12th of August. And to give you context and history for a lot of you, for a lot of companies registered outside of Vietnam, so for example, Singapore, US, India, UK, Australia, wherever that might be, looking to issue equity settled instruments to Vietnamese police, that has been pretty tricky. And historically, phantom or cash settled plans have been a lot more popular due to the nature of the current restrictions. With these changes, as Yash has highlighted, they're a little bit more positive and uh, flexible. So we envision that employee ownership can potentially increase in Vietnam for foreign companies issuing to current Vietnamese employees, but there's still some nuances. So let's kind of go through all of them one by one, so it's very clear for everyone tuning in live or checking out uh, this recording later what the changes are, what are the current rules and upcoming rules. So Yash, let's start with the kind of the baseline
Hmm.
is what's kind of the definition of the entities that can be implemented in employee share ownership plan or ESOP as we call it. So what are the current provisions and what's
Hmm.
changing? And kind of if you want to provide maybe your high level analysis, what the impact might be as a result.
Sure, Amit. So, if we talk about the implementation organization, and that implementation organization must be covering their employees from the Vietnam. So, in the erstwhile regulation, if you will go through, Amit, those regulations, so it was specifically mentioned that only employees from those entities can be covered who are having or which are having commercial presence in the Vietnam. So commercial presence means that you must be having some physical office which will be representing the offshore entity. So let's suppose if I will take an example, in a US company there is a implementing company. So ABC Inc. is the implementing company. So now I am not talking about the structure of that organization, not the holding structure I am talking about, but rather I am talking about only the commercial presence. So the earlier regulation was ignoring my holding structure. So it says that irrespective of my holding structure, if that company, implementing company, is having a commercial presence in the Vietnam, then only you can cover employees from those entities. So now why these amendments came into picture? So this has limited the coverage, because every entity, you must be well aware about, like if my plan is globally getting implemented, then you must be thinking that I should cover my employees from each and every entity. Like if the entity is a subsidiary, that entity is an associate relationship with me, then you are supposed to cover those employees also. So earlier my regulation was saying that only those company which are having commercial presence in the Vietnam, you can cover employees from that. So these earlier regulation was limiting the implementing company to cover employees from the subsidiary and the associate which are being present in the Vietnam country. Now if I talk about the amendment, so this is the major amendment, you can say, or you can say if any offshore company implementing the plan globally and they want to cover their Vietnam employees, so this is the most welcomed, or you can say this is the most attractive flexibility which is being provided by a amended regulation. So now amended regulation says that if we ignore the commercial presence in the Vietnam, so it specifically says that economic organization that have the relationship with the foreign organization through ownership of the capital. So they have removed the concept of this commercial presence in the Vietnam. So now it says that if you have a shareholding also in the Vietnam, so irrespective of like you are into the same line of the business as other offshore entities having. So now if I will give you an example, so let's suppose in a US there is a manufacturing entity called ABCINC, and in Vietnam there is a marketing company called DEF in the Vietnam. So now if that ABC Inc is holding equity shares, you can say the substantial equity share, more than 50% equity share, then it says that that entity becomes the subsidiary of that ABC Inc, that is the exact manufacturing entity of the US, and which is implementing the ESOP plan. So now it says that irrespective of my commercial presence in the Vietnam, if my shareholding structure is like this, that entity is my resulting entity is my subsidiary entity, resulting entity is my associate company, or like any of the relationship via the holding of the equity share, then offshore companies can cover employees from those entities also. Now the our analysis on this, like if you talk about the coverage, so earlier we were into the limited coverage area, so we were not allowed to cover employees from our subsidiary from the associate company. With this new amendments, now the coverage has been widened, so they have given the eligibility to cover employees from the subsidiary as well as the associate company. Because Amit, you already know that if any company is implementing ESOP plan, then there is a objective, major objective is the retention of those key talents, and or you can say attraction of the key talents. So
Yep.
if I would not be eligible to cover my employees from the subsidiary and the associate, then you can think yourself, how will I achieve this objective of the retaining the key employees? So that's why they have given the flexibility, like the amendments will be effective from the 12th of August. Now with respect to these amendments, you can now cover employees from the subsidiary and the associate company. So this is regarding the first amendment that has came up in the new circular 23.
Yeah, perfect. So to summarize, the good takeaway number one is that potentially more organizations will be able to offer equity settled incentive programs to Vietnam employees based on the wider definition of eligible foreign organizations. So that's definitely positive. So it can potentially allow more companies to offer employee ownership for their Vietnamese employees. Let's move on to the second aspect, which is probably the big elephant in the room, and that was
Yes, yes.
probably the trickiest aspect of the regulations that are current still, and that's the requirement for obtaining approval of a plan with the State Bank of Vietnam. So, Yash, would you mind just explaining everyone what the
Yeah,
current requirements are and what has changed, and then we can
yeah.
discuss the potential impact as a result.
Sure, Amit. Sure, definitely. So, if I talk about the earlier regulations which were prevailing in the Vietnam, and you can say kind of they were creating a hindrance for the offshore company to go with the equity plan, because equity plan serves major purpose. Like it serves the major purpose of being called as a long-term incentive plan. Because if I compare this equity plan with the phantom plan or any of the cash plan, so whenever I will end up paying cash to the employees, then that plan will you can say lose its feature of being a long term. Now if I talk about the equity, so if the objective is the long term incentive program, so definitely that objective is for attraction and the retention and aligning my company's performance with the employees performance. So since these were the hurdle in the erstwhile regulation, so if I talk about the erstwhile regulation, so there were two mandatory points, or you can say the two pain points for the offshore entity while implementing plan and covering employees from the Vietnam. So first hurdle was taking approval from the SBV. So state SBV is nothing but the State Bank of Vietnam. So like this is a central bank which is operating in the Vietnam. So each and every transaction which will be happening through Vietnam in other countries or from other countries in Vietnam. So you will have to report each and everything to the State Bank of Vietnam. And before reporting, you will have to take approval from the State Bank of Vietnam. So now let's suppose there is a condition like in a US company, one US company is implementing a plan and they intend to cover the employees from the Vietnam. So there can be nuances, there can be nitties gritties of the plan, and there can be complexities which would have been tailor made as per the US specific requirements. But
Mhm.
those specific requirements may or may not work as per the Vietnam law, because State Bank of Vietnam is keeping an eye on your plan. So it says that whenever you are implementing a plan, so please submit that plan to us before going to implement in the for the Vietnam employees also. Because if I am talking about please submit the plan to us, so what I will do, I will check all the conditions, all the terms which are being written in the plan document. So it might happen that one term which is being mentioned in the US as per the US laws, so that may be tricky for the Vietnam employees, that may be you can say ambiguous for the Vietnam employees. So on that case, that US employee, if State Bank of Vietnam feels that this is the case, then it may happen that my plan will be scratched for the Vietnam employee. So in that case, that US entity would not be able to cover my Vietnam employees. So this is the first requirement, taking approval from the State Bank of Vietnam. So on the taking approval, so obviously you will have to submit all the ESOP related document, ESOP plan related documents with the State Bank of Vietnam. And again, you will have to wait for the approval, because it is not very easy to obtain approval from the State Bank of Vietnam, because it is a central bank of the Vietnam. It is not like other local banks of the in other state, you can say. So
Yep.
now the second mandatory requirement or the pain point is the opening of the bank account. So it says that once you will take approval, so first pain point is like taking the approval. So still you will have to wait for taking the approval. It may end up going to, you can say, 3 months, 2 months, 4 months time period also in order to obtain the approval. But now after that, once you will take approval, so again it is not giving you the green flag to grant ESOPs to the Vietnam employees. It still says that you will have to get your account open with a licensed bank in the state Vietnam. So this is again the second pain point, you can say, because whenever there will be the cross-border movement of the funds, like remittance of the funds from the Vietnam employees to the other country, and whatever where there will be the sale of the equity share in a form of cashless exercise. So whatever will be the sale proceeds, so that has to be routed through that bank account, common account, which is being operated in a licensed bank in the Vietnam. So these were the two pain points, you can say. So now, in order to ease the implementation of the plan through the offshore entities, as I already given you the brief, that now Vietnam is more concerned towards attracting the capital flow in the Vietnam, like offshore capital flows in the Vietnam, and also attracting the foreign indirect investments, while like their employees can hold equity shares of the offshore entities. So they have removed the first pain point. So they are saying that it is not mandatory to take this approval from the state bank, but it doesn't mean, Amit, that it will be very easy for you to take the, you can say, implement the plan, because it still says that you will have to get your bank account opened with the licensed bank in the
Yep.
Vietnam. And if I am talking about the licensed bank, then you can already imagine yourself, if there are local banks below one layer below, so that top layer is still the State Bank of Vietnam.
Yep.
So whatever transaction you will be doing, so that will be, you can say, administered by the State Bank of Vietnam right now. So yes, if I would like to brief the analysis on that, still, yes, I know that approval stage is abolished by the new amendments now, but I have to get my account opened with the licensed bank. So again, you can say, which is directly linked to the State Bank of Vietnam.
Yep.
So it is like you are giving one flexibility, but again you are, you can say, caging that offshore company, like opening of the bank accounts and the reporting requirements, regulatory reporting requirements every monthly. You can
Yep.
say that under the new amendments.
Yep. Understood. Yeah, and look, so this is a big one, right? And to provide context for everyone, historically, because of this approval process, what it meant in practice, that process is time consuming. The guarantee of approval is not there. So in a lot of cases, company may have waited for more than 12 months with no guarantee that the plan would be approved. So the most common approach with a lot of companies is to avoid issuing equity settled plans or option plans and opt for a phantom or cash plan instead, because that's how you circumvent all the requirements.
Hmm.
So the good thing with upcoming changes from next week is that one of the hurdles, which is potentially by many perceived in the industry as the biggest hurdle, is removed. Having said that, there's still requirements in place. You still have to open that relevant account, and with that, you need to get notarized document, you need translations as well. So it takes a period of process, and success is still not guaranteed. Having said that, it's definitely a lot easier. So our second takeaway from the changes is that this is definitely a positive change that should potentially encourage greater participation of employees in equity settled plans. Having said that, at Capita and within the industry, we'll keep an eye on how that translates into practice. So at the end of today's session, we'll kind of provide our thoughts and overall. But before we do that, I think there's still two aspects, and Yash, you just mentioned. One of them
Hmm.
is that, first of all, is who's eligible to offer ESOP. Second of all, is that do you meet the relevant approval requirements from the
Yes.
bank, which is no longer required, but you still need a bank account to be opened. The
Hmm.
third one you talked about is reporting. Because
Reporting
if you have a
requirements.
plan in place that has met those eligibility criteria, you have to complete relevant reporting to the state bank. So do you want to,
Yes.
and there are changes to those rules as well. Do you want to explain what are current rules and what is changing?
Yes, Amit. So definitely there are changes with regards to the reporting as well. So now you can say they have handcuffed the offshore entities for the very frequent reportings now. So like in the above 2 points which I had mentioned, so they are giving the flexibility, or they have abolished the mandatory requirements to be complied with in Vietnam, but in a form of reporting. If they are easing the implementation, so on the other hand they are saying that your requirements, reporting requirements, will get increased or might get complicated in a way. Like if I talk about the earlier regulation, so you were supposed to report every quarter. So like every 3 months of the you know that quarter ends every 3 months. So reporting requirements were of only 3 months gap. So like you have the rest of the 2 months, and again in the third month you will have to report for that quarter. But now, under the new amendments, so since they are giving a flexibility, like removal of the approval from the SBB, and in fact, they have increased the coverage, bandwidth of the coverage of the employees. So, what they are saying for the reporting perspective, so they are saying that now reporting is required every month. So, in order to see that every month what are the activities going on for the Vietnam employees, starting with the first exercise or first stage, that is the grant stage or the award stage. So you will have to report to the State Bank of Vietnam, like in a prescribed format. So there is a prescribed format, or you can say
Yeah.
the online format also is being prescribed. So that has to be submitted to the State Bank of Vietnam. Now this says that what is the date, a specific date. So they are saying that not later than the 12th date of the following month. So now let's suppose you have done some activity in the current month. Now it is your responsibility to report that activity not later than the 12th date of the following month. So again, this is the requirement. So I would like to tell you now, this will create a win-win for both. So for the offshore entity as well, for the Vietnam also. Because if I am saying that my approval requirement from the Vietnam has been removed, so they are not saying that role of State Bank of Vietnam has been reduced. So still the role is in place, role is in existence. So State
Yeah.
Bank will also administer all the activities via, first the requirement is the opening of the bank account. So whatever will be the transaction, so a State Bank of Vietnam will administer transactions through that account. Now,
Yeah.
second is whenever you will be reporting monthly, so again the SPV roles comes into the play. So again, State Bank of Vietnam will be administering. Now, from the implementing or the offshore company's point of view, so earlier they have to collate the data for the 3 months for every quarter reporting requirements. So you can say, if I talk from the layman perspective, so it might be complex for those entities which are small in size, and they
Yeah.
intends to cover the employees from the Vietnam. So what they have given, so this is that whatever activity, irrespective like big in size or small in size, then you can easily report on a monthly basis. So it you can say ease the complexities of quarterly reporting, gathering the data from every month, like, and collating the data. So it may or may not happen, Amit, that those data would be reconciling with each other, because you know that
Yeah.
there are multiple activities involved while granting the awards. So this is the changes. These are the changes which came into the reporting requirements.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. So number one, as we talked about, maybe more companies will be able to offer equity plans. Number two, the requirements are a little bit easier to implement. But number three, you need to report to the state bank a bit more frequently on a monthly basis. So you can see it as a trade-off because there may be a more administrative burden for companies to comply with
Hmm.
the 12th of the month deadline each month to ensure. If you want to offer an equity plan, you need to ensure you meet the reporting obligations, right?
Yes.
So the final topic that I think is a big change in the regulations that's coming up is the form of plans or equity instruments that are allowed. So the intention is obviously for a lot of regulators is to ensure that they act in the interest of the local employees. So what I want to ask you, Yash, to
Hmm.
explain is what were the kind of the form of equity plans or instruments allowed currently, and what are the changes coming up from next Monday? And then we can talk about what does it mean in terms of what kind of ESOP
Hmm.
frameworks are potentially going to be allowed to be in place.
So, Amit, before proceeding to the last amendment, so I would like to ask you one question, like what type
Hmm.
of plan, or if you are required to pay something from your pocket, then what do you expect, like there should be burden on your pocket or not? Like how you want the plan to be structured? Like you must be
Yeah,
well aware of the type of the plan implementing globally.
yeah, for sure. And look, like I said, ultimately, in the universe of equity plans or equity
Hmm.
compensation, you can structure plans in many different ways.
Hmm.
So Common one in the unlisted or startup world is options. And the nature of
Hmm.
option is a right for you to acquire shares at a predetermined price. So as an employee, I receive that right, but I have to
Hmm.
make the payment to the company to buy the shares. If the
Yes.
price appreciates, you effectively buy at a discount, right? So
Hmm.
at a
Hmm.
lower price that's looked in on day one. So as a result, as an employee, I have to pay something to the company to
Hmm.
receive an asset in the form of shares. There's other instruments that can be utilized, share rights or RSUs. In those cases, you receive a right to receive shares at a future
Hmm.
date at vesting once you meet certain conditions. In that case, there's no payment required to be made.
Hmm.
Right? So in some contexts, it can be referred to as free shares or rights to shares with no
Hmm.
expense for you. Um, Other ways you can do that, you can issue shares up front. And in those cases, they can be effective free shares, no cost to the employee,
Hmm.
or there's a purchase price.
Hmm.
Speaking of purchasing shares, a lot of listed companies, a lot of multinationals offer ESPPs, which stands for Employee Share Purchase Programs. In those cases, employees can sacrifice some of their salary and purchase shares of the company, usually at preferential terms.
Hmm.
There's either like a matching component of contributions, shares, or maybe a discount.
So Amit, do
So
you?
when you
So I would like to intervene. I would like to intervene between Amit. So do
yeah,
you really think, or do you favor like when company is offering to you, so you will have to pay something from your pocket? So if company has come up with offer to you and they are offering something, they are giving you the right. So do you really think that it would be favorable? So let's suppose I will give you an example. So
yeah,
if my prevailing fair market value at the time of paying, when I would be required to pay, so
hmm
that is you can say the 50 USD, $50.
yeah,
So now let's suppose this value can be $1,000, $2,000. So do you
yeah,
really think that still you would like to pay something from your pocket? So do you really want to create that burden on your pocket while paying something?
yeah. Look, in a lot of cases, the simplest way, if you don't have to pay, just easier for you as an employee
Hmm.
because nothing out of pocket and administratively, right? But in some cases, there's a requirements where you do have to do that, right? So in a way, sometimes you can't get away based on regulations. So generally, like
But
if you can
hmm,
structure something that doesn't require you to pay out of pocket, it definitely can provide
exactly.
benefit to the employees. But in some cases, it may be required. So for that reason, would love to, from your perspective, kind of
Hmm.
contrast the rules specifically in Vietnam because your question is quite relevant to
Hmm.
what is actually going to be allowed moving forward.
Yes, so specifically this was the question. So I was coming to that. Like
Yeah.
anything you want to pay or not, because this is the question from the employee's point of view. You already
Yeah.
can think yourself, you are getting equities from the company, any offshore company, and that company is aggressively growing. So now
hmm
let's suppose that company's price may reach to $1,000 also. At that
Yeah.
time, whether you will be paying that much of huge amount in the form of taxation from your pocket or in the
mm
form of exercise price also. So it may happen that share price may going aggressively, but you
Yeah.
do not command that much of high salary that it
Yeah.
can be adjusted from your payroll. So now this is the challenge in globally worldwide also if you are implementing a plan. So to ease this challenge na, so Vietnam has came up with a major amendment in the form of the form of the bonus stock bonus plans. So earlier there were two types of the plan. So now they were talking about the direct stock bonuses where you will be getting directly equity shares, and second where you will be getting the right to own the equity share in the future. So now if I am talking about right to own the equity share in the future, so it was not talking about like how those settlements will be done. Like if
Yeah.
I talk about like the cross border movement of the remittance of the funds from the Vietnam employees to the
Yeah.
other jurisdiction in the form of exercise price and the taxation. So
mm
now to ease this complexity, because Vietnam is more concerned towards its foreign exchange, so they want to limit the movement of the foreign exchange, Vietnam foreign currencies to other worlds. So
Yeah.
they want to, or State Bank of Vietnam wants to know like for what purpose you are remitting the money. You can remit money because it can happen that you can remit money for the terrorist activities also, because this is the
mm
major case. If you are the one who is creating a company in one offshore country and you want to cover employees from the another country, so it may happen that you want to flow the funds or you can say manipulate the funds from one country to the another country. So in order to avoid this complexity of the State Bank of Vietnam, so it says that now there are still two types of the plan, but they are saying first is the direct stock plan, stock bonus plan, in which you will be getting upfront equity share without paying anything. Like as you already told that there are RSUs and the RSAs in which the shares will be of the free of cost. Now,
Yeah.
second type of the plan they are talking about. So they are saying the equity plan in which you will be giving right to the employees to acquire equity shares, but those equity shares should not, or you can say that company should not generate cash flow out of the Vietnam. So
Yep.
it says that there should not be any remittance from the Vietnam. The plan can be implemented in such a way that it will be facilitate, like whenever I will be settling at the time of exercise, or you can say at the time of sale of the equity share. So what I will do, let's suppose I am in a US, I am the implementing company. So what I will do, I will sell equity share in my country only, without taking anything from the employees from the Vietnam. And it says that whatever will be the exercise price, whatever will be the applicable taxes, so I will adjust those portion from my sales proceed and will pass on the net proceed to the employees. So
Yep.
it definitely saves the cross border movement of the Vietnam funds to the other jurisdictions. Now
Yep.
another reason why this major amendment came up, because you already know that, as we have already talked about that, like whenever I will be creating a plan, so there will be intricacies from the respective jurisdiction. So let's suppose from the US, from Singapore, so there will be requirement, like I will have to be adhere to these rules, like regarding the vesting, regarding the grant, regarding the exercise. But these rules may be ambiguous if we are analyzing those rules as per the Vietnam law. So it says that if you are creating a plan, so you should create a plan which is clear to the employees. There should not be any ambiguity from the Vietnam point of view, and whatever the terms and conditions, so that should be in line with the Vietnam law also. So
Yep.
it not only allows you, or you can say ease the complexity of the cross border movement of the funds, but also it takes care of the employees in a good faith of the Vietnam country. Because Vietnam says that if you are creating a plan for my country residents, Vietnam residents, then each and everything should be clear. There should not be any ambiguity. This should not happen that there should be some hidden terms in the plan document while you are giving grants to the Vietnam employees. So this is the last and the major amendment which has came up in Circular 23.
Yeah. No, for sure. So, and it's very important. So, kind of to just wrap up and summarize this, right? The changes is, first of all, from next week onwards, more organizations should be eligible and able to offer equity compensation, which is a positive. Number two, the requirements for approval from the State Bank of Vietnam have been removed. However, there's still additional requirements you have to follow. So yes, it's definitely becoming easier to offer equity settled or plans into Vietnamese employees. It's still not the most straightforward process. Number three, if you offer equity, there's reporting requirements that are a lot more frequent now. So you have to do it on a monthly basis. And number four, when you think about structuring the plan, you need to think about how that's going to work, because the big change now, as Yash just outlined, is that a plan you can offer should not result in cash flowing overseas out of Vietnam. So when you think about traditional option plans, when you have to pay option costs to the company, that may not exactly work as you intend with these requirements. So you need to think strategically and maybe consider net settlement other mechanisms, or structuring plan in a way that meets the local requirements, because it's very important. So for that reason, to summarize, there's a different kind of circumstances may be in place. So if your company has previously implemented an, let's say an option plan or equity settle plan, you need to be very aware about the changes to the monthly reporting regime, because it's your obligation will change from next week onwards. If you previously had a phantom plan and you're now considering should I go ahead and change it up to an equity settled plan, it may be possible, but you'll need to consider various aspects, right? What is your reward framework? What are you trying to achieve? Is this the right way for you to proceed? And there's a third circumstance is maybe companies who don't have a plan in place and they're considering creating one. So once again, you'll need to consider all these requirements to decide what's appropriate for you. A typical consulting answer is yes, you would appreciate this. It depends, right? It depends on individual circumstances, right? Uh,
Yes.
our recommendation for everyone is that it's definitely important for you to be familiar of the changes, whether you have a plan in place, whether you think you're rolling out the plan, whether you think you're going to be modifying your current scheme. It's important to kind of understand the nuances of the four key points we've highlighted. What we're going to be doing, we're going to be publishing a paper kind of summarizing this a little bit more detail, which we'll publish on our website, make it available to everyone, so you can refer to that. Having said that, within Capita, as part of our equity management, we don't just do administration of schemes. We provide advisory on structuring the plans. And this is part of the work that Yash leads for us. So if you have questions about your specific company and what these rules mean for you, for your current scheme or the one you want to roll out, please do feel free to reach out to Capita. We'd love to talk to you and help you navigate the requirements of Vietnam. as well as other jurisdictions. So this is my Yash. Just want to thank you for your time. So I
Thank
know
you,
we
Amit.
went really in depth, which I think was very informative and helpful. So thanks as always for helping share the information about the upcoming rules and changes. For
Yes,
everyone
Amit.
else, thanks for dialing in. Keep an eye on Capita's future LinkedIn Lives that we do regularly on various topics in relation to anything to do with equity ownership. Um, thanks for this. Keep an eye on our posts about these rule changes. And if you have any questions about what does it mean for your organization, please do feel free to reach out. We'll leave it there. So thanks very much and have a good one, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Amit. So it was
Good.
really great talking to you.